Jesus said to the crowds and to the disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it, but do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the shoulders of others, but they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. They love to have the place of honor at banquets and the best seats in the synagogues, and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have people call them rabbi. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all students. And call no one your father on earth, for you have one Father, the one in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted." Thanks be to God for this New Testament lesson. The book of Joshua in the Old Testament, beginning in the 3rd chapter, on the 7th verse. The Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they may know that I will be with you as I was with Moses. You are the one who shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant. When you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Joshua then said to the Israelites, "Draw near and hear the words of the Lord your God." Joshua said, "By this you shall know that among you is the living God, who is without fail will drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites."
Sounds like gems.
The ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is going to pass before you into the Jordan. So now select 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. When the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, rest in the waters of the Jordan flowing from above shall be cut off. They shall stand in a single heap. When the people set out from their tents to cross over the Jordan, the priests bearing the ark of the covenant were in front of the people. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of the harvest. So when those who bore the ark had come to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the edge of the waters flowing from above stood still, rising up in a single heap far off at Adam, the city that is beside Sarathon, while those flowing toward the sea of Arabah, the Dead Sea, were wholly cut off. Then the people crossed over opposite Jericho, while all Israel were crossing over on dry land. The priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan until the entire nation finished crossing over the Jordan. Thanks be to God for this His word. I usually find preaching on the Old Testament more of a challenge than the New Testament, and that was certainly true with this as well. If you were able to be present last Sunday, today's sermon is a continuation, Moses leading but ending, and the Israelites to the Promised Land, with Joshua being the one completing the journey, with them going across the Jordan. In the Ark of the Covenant, God's people would be carrying God's divine word across a threshold to ensure the freedom of a nation and the teaching for generations to come. Joshua's story sets up a ritual of images for each of us who attempts to cross the rivers of our own lives. And I'd like this morning to spend some time looking at those images to see how we are all needed to make the journey across happen. The The opening scene directs the Israelites in this way. When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place. Follow it so that you know the way you should go, for you have not passed this way before. Now I thought about those instructions, and I'd like by starting to ask all of you, how many of you here started in your younger years determined to head toward a certain lifestyle or direction, be it at work or home or in your aspirations, and found yourselves in a totally different place than you ever imagined? Nobody? Or someone gives you a clear set of directions as to how to accomplish something or get somewhere, and you decide to ignore them, and you end up getting lost. This was the concern of the leaders of the Israelites, that they had never made this journey, and that they had better follow the priests. The situation of the Israelites reminded me of a couple of common sense stories. In Calvin and Hobbes, a cartoon, it's a series, and Calvin says, you could step out in the road tomorrow and wham! You're hit by a cement truck. So my motto is, live for the moment. What's yours? And Hobbes answers, look down the road. Now there's another story that has to do with directions, and this is of more serious nature. The head of the Nevada Highway Patrol says that at 100 miles per hour, you're not driving a car, you're aiming it. You see, we need to realize that certainly in living in our world in this day, where things often seem to be traveling 100 miles an hour at times, that you can't drive that kind of change. You can't control that kind of change. You can only, if you will, aim your life or your ministry in a given direction. The rivers of life, be they the Jordan or your current river of life, are very swiftly moving. Much like God's people of Joshua's time, we are all best helped when we aim ourselves by learning and following God's ways. Let me try to illustrate this. Many of you here today likely do or in the past have done some walking or hiking in the woods. I find that nature tends to eke out well-worn paths and that can keep you going in a safe direction. Now sometimes when I've gone into the woods though, I certainly have gotten off the path. And there are a couple of things that will get me back on track. Sometimes it's by noticing water, even a little bit, and then looking for larger pools or finding my way toward a stream. Or secondly, I might see signs of broken branches and maybe even something that looks like chopped logs, as if someone has traveled this way before. You see, it is the same for me, being able to travel God's path or a faith life and having life be fulfilling. And yet still sometimes I get off that path and I get lost as to my purpose. Maybe it's because of the negative attitudes of those who are around me, or the circumstances of the world seem overwhelming. We might become discouraged by those needs. And I don't know about you, but often what happens next is that out of the blue, I'll receive a thank you card or a comment from another person who usually is quiet, but who chooses to share their experience of hope. That one small gesture can reroute my course and recharge my spirit to be like that ever-ready battery waiting to rejoin the march of believers who have walked for centuries. I was trying to have a conversation with the kids in the children's message that it's not as if we always believe and we're always strong in our faith. There can be ebbs and flows, ups and downs. And sometimes we may even be the folks who need to stop at the side of the road and wait with the person who is unsure or doubting exactly where they belong in this faith march. I think in part that's why we have the church, that we need to seek other people, either because we need the strength to go on in our faith, or we need to be that strength for somebody else. Now, crossing the Jordan becomes a symbol for the Israelites of the moment they would cross over a threshold from their past into their future. But it is that they had to move forward in order to make it to the promised land. And I think we too need to still hear the words of the living God to meet the challenges of our day and time. But like the Israelites who stepped into the river, we cannot go through life with our brakes on. Remember that Joshua is told to pick one from each of the tribes of Israel to be the ones to carry the ark. And again, I think this believes to God's concern that all people are making it, that everyone is vital in order to go forward. It's not just a select few. You are living, and you make a difference, and you can help others contend, perhaps, with pessimism or anxiety by offering them your perspective, your faith. So what I'd like to do is use the analogy of driving to talk about what enables us as individuals and as a church to move forward and to live life fully. Rule number 1, you can't steer a parked car. That means to me that if I pay too much attention trying to control and have security, that all of us can become stagnant and go nowhere. It is only by risking and opening ourselves up and by trusting that we have the ability to move forward or to move anywhere for that matter. I'm sure it wasn't easy for Joshua to ask each of the 12 tribes to send one of their best to walk into the depths of the river, and yet he had to move forward and do that. And that's exactly what he did. And you see, any and all faith communities with each generation to come must trust one another in order to pass on the Christian message, or simply for the teachings of the church to go on into the next generation. That is, the love of God does not fully live if we keep it to ourselves. Meaning, if only I get the message, if only you get the message, and we don't live it and spread it, how do others know about it? Now the second rule, you can't drive forward without a rear view mirror. Although I've seen a few of you try. We need to share our past, is what I think that means, as a guidepost, showing us where we've been and aiding us to where we are going down the road. Haven't many of us experienced ending up exactly where we started, or going around in circles? The rear view mirror of life helps us to learn from those of us who have gone before. And I think that's why biblical stories, in part, are used as the foundation of our faith. Because it shares of human experience and wisdom and sometimes stupidity of those who have gone before, but who all seem to be interested in a relationship with the divine. They were seeking to know God. Now the third rule is, you can't prepare the car while it's still in motion. I know some of us have attempted to do this. I've been one of the people trying to get the wiper to work while I'm still driving. It doesn't work.
I do that.
The waters of the Jordan were stopped as motion when we read this. The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood on dry land in the middle of the Jordan. You see, God knew that the word would not survive if they tried to combat both the force and the motion of the water at the same time. You see, the speed and challenges of life can be like that, from week to week. And often I've come to think that this 1 hour of worship is a time when we can stop, we can center ourselves, and maybe have some calm to make better decisions, to cross over our Jordans. Maybe you are facing a big challenge or decision, and you too need to stop before you move too fast in the wrong direction. Now the last rule of the road is for the 21st century, and it's one that carried the Israelites across the waters as well. You can't run on empty. I believe just as we need the basics of life, food and water and shelter, to make it across whatever our Jordan may be, that often we also need the faith of others, the hope of others, to carry us through. Just like the priests bore the covenant until the people could cross over the Jordan. When you are empty, or if there are times that you feel almost empty, let yourself be filled with God, or be filled with the faith of somebody else, or let yourself be filled with the beauty of music and of nature and quiet. And don't try to run alone, or until you're almost unempty. For we are all needed, and sometimes we don't always recognize what we need. But God does, and promises to fulfill our need, and waits for us to turn toward him to receive it. Come to this table. It is set for you, and you, and you, to fill our souls so that we can live this precious life. Thanks be to God.